Hello everybody, welcome to Bitcoin Not Crypto. I'm Forrest Hodel on X and Twitter, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the effects that FASB fair value accounting will have on MicroStrategy and other Bitcoin Treasury companies in the public market. But before I do that, if you want to get yourself some Bitcoin, the best way to do that, in my opinion, and where I buy all of my own Bitcoin, is at Bitcoin Well. If you use my link in the description, they'll actually give you some free Bitcoin, which is really great. And they have non-KYC options available. They're available in the US and Canada, and they're a non-custodial platform, which means when you send them money, they send you Bitcoin directly to your hardware wallet or through the Lightning Network. So check them out, link in the description, and if you sign up, it goes to support this show. So thank you very much. So right now in the US, the accounting for Bitcoin or crypto is basically the same as like fine art and things like that, which is called indefinite intangible asset accounting. And so what this means is that they don't value these things like they did if they held bonds or stocks instead. It's very difficult for the rest of the kind of buyers and accountants to look at this kind of information and see that there's lots of value to it. It ends up looking a lot more negative to their balance sheet than it would under a more fair accounting system. So the way that it does that is if you bought Bitcoin, say at 100,000 and it goes down to 90,000, but then it goes up to 110,000 within 1 quarter, if you are a public company, you would have to mark down your buy and basically the earnings and your balance sheet from the 100K Bitcoin, the Bitcoin in there, you'd have to mark down from 100K down to 90,000, even though it's gone back up and even beyond. And that is because the way they view this is they view it as something that doesn't really have very much value and is just a risk to the balance sheet. They don't try to view it as something tangible, as something like stocks and bonds. They just treat it differently, and that's the way they treat it. So if you look at the earnings per share in MicroStrategy over the last 4 quarters or even beyond, since they've implemented the Bitcoin strategy, you'll see that they're negative. And that's because they've had to mark down their Bitcoin at any time, and Bitcoin's an extremely volatile asset. So within that month, it's probably dipped lower, or even if it hasn't, they still just use all their cash flows to buy Bitcoin, and they're still going to have a negative earning per share and all that anyway. And they're taking out debt, and they're doing all these different strategies that will also increase or negatively impact their earnings per share. But the Bitcoin on their balance sheet really has a negative effect to these key metrics that financial advisors look at, that traders look at, speculators look at, investors look at, algorithms and bots look at. And so it has seemingly, unless you go deeper, unless you look at you basically have to do a lot of accounting yourself, because the Bitcoin isn't accounted for in this just kind of neutral way. It's accounted for in a negative way. You would have to do additional accounting as an individual investor or institution to really value MicroStrategy at its fair prices. So this has changed. FASB, fair value accounting, has come into effect, which is a new way of accounting for Bitcoin on your balance sheet. What this does is it allows you to market at the fair value based on purchase price and based on price of the asset at the time of accounting for it for your earnings. So we will see a very big change to companies that already hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet coming into this first quarter, and we will see some changes to companies that acquire Bitcoin. The changes we'll see to Bitcoin treasury companies that already hold Bitcoin is it will be marked at the value of Bitcoin going into today, January 1st. It has already been marked at the value. So let's see what it was at. So Bitcoin was probably priced somewhere at 94,000 or so. And this is really interesting. So all of MicroStrategy's earnings, I mean their average buy of Bitcoin is at 60 something thousand. all of that price appreciation of their Bitcoin will not go to their earnings. It will go to residual earnings, which is a part of basically their reports that they'll be doing. And you won't see that on earnings per share. But on to the future, from now until the end of the first quarter, you will see any price appreciation of Bitcoin go on to their earnings per share. And you will see that basically they will probably, I mean, if Bitcoin does what we think it's going to do, we're entering a part of the traditional 4-year cycle where Bitcoin goes up quite a lot, which is exciting. And, if it does that, then we will see that MicroStrategy will have pretty high earnings per share. And in fact, what is interesting is there's a lot of speculation on whether MicroStrategy will be able to enter the S&P 500. They hit the metrics on a lot of accounts. They hit the market cap metric, and where they don't hit the metric is earnings per share. So the metric for S&P 500 inclusion into the index is that the last 4 quarters of earnings need to be positive, so a combined positive. And in fact, Bitcoin basically only needs to go up about $5,000, so just shy of 100,000 by the end of Q1 for MicroStrategy's past 4 quarters of earnings to end up being positive, with the one big positive side of the because they hold so much Bitcoin, it's going to affect their earning per share so much, it'll wipe out all the 3 negative earnings prior to it, which will make them qualify on that metric for the S&P 500. Now, the S&P 500 also has a group that dictates whether something should be included or not based on their feelings, right? How they feel that day, if they woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Not quite like that, but we will see. It's speculation whether or not they will end up being in the S&P 500, but they only need an estimate of about $5,000 of price appreciation in Bitcoin's price from today to the end of Q1 for them to qualify for the earnings per share metric of S&P 500 inclusion. So going forward onto that, we will see a big shift just on their snapshot metrics that people might look at. If you go to TradingView, you look at their chart, you see, whoa, negative earnings for so long. And then all of a sudden you see a positive earnings. Oh, well, what's happening here? This is exciting. This is interesting. They've become a positive earning company. In fact, they've been that way the whole time. It's just their accounting made them seem like they weren't, because they were so heavily invested in this asset that did not have fair accounting. So this will change people's perceptions, the average kind of trader, maybe the average investor, somebody looking at this, and it might change the way that bots look at this, algorithms look at this. They're very unemotional. In fact, they don't have emotions at all. They just trade off of metrics. If there's some algorithms and bots that trade off of positive earnings and maybe buy and do a little momentum, we might see increased volatility to the upside based on these positive earnings as opposed to negative ones in the past. So that's kind of what I found out and figured out for FASB when it pertains to MicroStrategy. I think it's a little bit speculative to see whether this really makes that big of a difference, because I think a lot of the big money have looked deeper into, they're not just looking at earnings per share quarter after quarter. They're going to be looking at this company a little more in depth, and they're the ones who maybe move the market around a little bit for MicroStrategy. So will there be that much change? It's really hard to know. It's really hard to see, but this is something, some potential scenarios that could change because of FASB when it specifically looks at MicroStrategy. Now, what this means for other companies, however, is that they never had to deal with the unfair value of the accounting principles for Bitcoin on the balance sheet like MicroStrategy did if they're going to adopt Bitcoin now. Right now that FASB is out, they've adopted it. It's just mandatory to have adopted it for crypto assets. And when they buy Bitcoin and hold it on their balance sheet, they will see either their earnings per share, they will see their balance sheet go up and down based on the purchase price of Bitcoin and the snapshot of it at their earnings calls and all of this kind of stuff. So This really helps incentivize companies to buy Bitcoin because it now becomes an asset that can improve their balance sheet, as opposed to before where it really could only be a negative effect on a balance sheet. That's a big deal. That makes it really a lot less desirable to buy Bitcoin as a public company because you know that it's going to look bad on your balance sheet because there's no other option. There's no other way to account for it. So now there's a positive way to account for it if it ends up being positive in its price appreciation while they hold it. And this will allow them to, it'll be a lot more popular in board meetings and through shareholders and stuff for companies to adopt Bitcoin. We've already seen this, like every other day there's a public company that has adopted Bitcoin. Maybe they're small in size, but they've adopted Bitcoin. There's 70 plus public companies in North America that hold Bitcoin. This is a number that I think will grow because of FASB fair value accounting adoption and the changes to the indefinite intangible asset that Bitcoin used to be. Now it is just an asset like any other. So I think that's huge, and I think it will increase the Bitcoin ownership of public companies or from public companies. If there's anything I've missed in this video about FASB, I would love to know. Some information it's been hard to figure out information about this one for some reason. And there was a ton of speculation prior to this about it basically being retroactive, the changes. So all the earnings per share would be adjusted, all the previous earnings per share adjusted. Now it turns out that's not the case. So I hope to have proper updated information in this video. I hope that I'm correct in this way, but if I'm not, if there's something I've missed, comment that in the comment section below. Let's help build the information that we have so that we can make smart, informed decisions. So thanks everybody for watching. Check out Bitcoin Well if you want to get yourself some Bitcoin and gold storage, and we'll see you on the next video.